And always, guys, remember, just stay humble. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, my name is Rory. It's game week 5 in the Premier League. I'm joined by my very good friend, Adam. And we have a very special friend back this weekend. Charles, how are we doing, man?
Yeah, really good, man. Really good. 5 games in, and already the drama is at record levels.
I can't remember as intense a start to the season as we've seen this.
Right, it feels full on, doesn't it? I don't know what we're going to do by Christmas, but hey, here we are.
It's been a lot. It's been a lot. But before we get into it, we're going to get sidetracked straight away. Adam, how are you doing, man? Good weekend.
I'm doing very well. I sense I might be the kind of in between equilibrium to all of these debates going on. In particular, one that we're going to talk about, which was the big game that happened yesterday. But yeah, all good. We did reminisce offline, Rory, about our respective weather conditions as well. So it seems like similar vibes across Europe. Maybe the world is nearing an end. We'll find out soon enough, I'm sure. But yeah, let's crack on, Rory.
One can hope. One can hope. Well, guys, this week we are going to be talking about, of course, that absolute barn burner up in Manchester as Man City drew 2-2 with Arsenal. We will be talking about, I've just clicked off the links. We will be talking about also, going to edit this out. We'll be talking about West Ham and their horrendous start to the season as they lose 3-0 to bitter rivals Chelsea at home. Spurs learning a few lessons and getting the job done against Brentford. And how much trouble are Wolves in? Charles is going to catch us up with that one as Villa come from behind with some late action to get the job done there. And we'll, of course, find a little bit of time to talk about the big news coming out of Goodison Park today that they have new owners. So, guys, we're going to take a very quick break. And when we come back, we're going to get into all the action. We'll see you on the other side. And here we are. It's time to discuss all the Premier League action. Adam, are you ready for us to go into Manchester City 2, Arsenal 2? Are you ready?
I'm ready as best as you guys are, I'm sure.
Let's go through chronologically. So first, I have to say, Manchester City started the game incredibly, and I got PTSD to all those times we've been absolutely hammered by them. I think the second that Haaland goal went in, I messaged Adam, I messaged my cousin, I messaged the boys chat going, this is going to be 3-0 now. We are going to get destroyed. Adam, how impressed were you by City's start? They just did not give us a second to think.
Yeah, the mentality was there from the very beginning. You could see they had a game plan. They knew what they were trying to achieve. Just overwhelmed Arsenal. I think Arsenal were expecting it to be maybe a more fluid game, maybe a few exchanges, but maybe them being able to get a stranglehold of the game and dictate the play. But it wasn't to be. You know, Man City didn't give them a moment's rest in that respect. And I think it was very clear what they kind of tried to achieve, which was to exploit maybe a bit of that kind of central aspect between Saliba and Gabriel, kind of stretch the kind of space between both them two, as well as the wing backs in Urin Timber and Calafiori. And that's where the likes of Salvino was able to exploit, to an extent, that kind of first half performance where he was able to run down constantly and come on the inside a number of times. But yeah, it certainly did feel like they'd exploited an opportunity within that defensive line. And I think it was something that we talked about offline during the game, which was we felt like the midfield weren't close enough to the gaps, so they weren't really protecting that kind of defensive line, which made it more important for the likes of Saliba and Gabriel to dictate who they were marking and being on top of it, because that middle of the area got really congested at times, and it was really important that they kind of made sure they were solidified in their moments. But they had to ride that period out, and eventually they did, and managed to get themselves back into the game, which we'll allude to later. But yeah, for those early exchanges, Rory, I felt that that was their kind of game plan, was to really consolidate in that middle of the park, make it difficult, and stretch the game, which was going to be one of the focal points for Pep. But yeah, certainly something that we saw which kind of made the game as intense as it was, Rory.
It's not something that Pep often does, is like keep his wingers super wide and try to get, like, they're so used to like just cutting inside and coming centrally, but it was definitely a concerted effort of like Savino just out far as possible. And I don't know about you, Charles, but obviously now this was Calafiori's full debut, right? First start. he was struggling at the beginning. Now, it's really clever play from Savinho for the goal because he kind of sells him the dummy. The touch brings him inside. Calafiori's not kind of expecting it. I was worried about his start. Were you concerned there? Because I could just see that gap open every single time.
Yeah, so I think rather than that being about Calafiori, I think it's more about Savinho. I think sometimes you get a weird thing to say, right? In cricket, you sometimes get a mystery spinner, and it's someone where you don't really know which way it's going to go. And for the first 10 or 15 games of their career, everyone's like, I don't even know. And they get ridiculous amounts of wickets. I feel like football is quite similar with wingers. If you get a winger that's not really been seen too much, it's hard to scout them properly. It's hard to really understand where they fit into a team. And I thought Pep did a brilliant job of playing to their strengths. And I don't think it's what Arsenal had trained for, and certainly Calafiori had trained for. But having said that, I think, Gabriel got pulled out of position a little bit. He can understand why. But I like this. This is what we turn up to watch, right? Is innovation, is people doing something different. I chatted to someone before the game and I said, I'm always disappointed with how Pep sets up for games nowadays. I feel Man City have got to a level that they're so much better than the majority of their opposition. They don't really do their homework. They just play their game. It's something that Wenger used to do with Arsenal when we were at our height, which was, it doesn't matter who you're playing against, just play your style, because it's so often going to win you a game. When it goes wrong, it looks terrible. But that's where Pep's been for a while. And I was really impressed that he turned up and, for that particular goal and that start of the game, Man City outthought or outmaneuvered Arsenal. So, yeah, all credit to them, really.
Yeah, you could see that these are two managers who really want to beat each other. They really want to beat each other. Yeah, and you can see that Pep was bringing his A game here. Now, obviously, next there's the big moment in the game, which is kind of a big moment in the season, I suppose, now, as it seems that Rodri is going to be out for the season. That kind of, when there's an injury that's kind of non-impact, it always is a bit more concerning. Adam, this is kind of, this was one of the turning points of the game, right? This was the first turning point of the game for City. I think it did allow Arsenal into the game a bit more psychologically, more than anything, even if City were kind of covering with Kovacic, obviously not as effective. I feel like there was a psychological lift from Arsenal once that happened. But how big do you expect this to be for City across this season? Like, if he's out all season, they're going to have to bring in someone in January, because with all due respect to Kovacic, he's not the same player, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. They're different types of players completely. And yeah, like you alluded to, the impact of Rodri not being there completely, you saw how much of an influence he has on the pitch, how much he can articulate to his teammates, but how much of an influence he has on the game. Even in those moments where Man City do struggle, he always seems to come up with the goods at the very end, late minute winners, for example, or late minute equalizers. He is key to kind of making sure that the rhythm of the game, the rhythm of the tempo, the rhythm of the press is dictated by him. And yeah, there was that stat that came about, with games where he doesn't play, that's where they tend to lose their kind of games in the season. And that was very much what looks like was going to happen in this particular game, because yeah, it seems innocuous at the time, but it seems like it is a ligament damage of some sorts to his knee, which is unfortunate. But I think also what also wasn't really alluded to as much, but when obviously Arsenal went into the low block, I felt City did struggle with that creativity, and that was maybe the impacts of a Kevin De Bruyne, and that's going to be important in terms of how Man City transition around these players, because inevitably there are going to be opportunities where this happens. It's about how they kind of counteract it. And I felt like City did struggle with that for the majority of this match. They really didn't know what to do with the ball, as much as they had all of the possession, and we'll allude to the second half, but for as much possession as they had in the first half. And when Arsenal rode that kind of moment, then they really did struggle to control the tempo of the game.
Yeah, I think this is a definition of a game of two halves, and I kind of want to treat them both individually, right? Because they both need their own analysis, I think. But Charles, if we look at Rodri goes off, and then Arsenal do come into the game, and Calafiori, what a beautiful man, a beautiful strike, a beautiful moment. Just, I could not be happier for the man. I love that he ran over to Arteta. Arteta definitely wasn't into it as much as he was, but I love that he ran over to Arteta and tried to celebrate with him. It felt like a huge moment. And as I said, I kind of went back to the PTSD of getting slapped at the Etihad so many times. And for us to not only equalize, but then go ahead in the game. And really imprint ourselves on the game. It felt like a huge moment in this Arsenal story, in this Arteta story of like,
yeah, 100%.
we were able to imprint ourselves, right?
Yeah, 100%. And actually, if I come back to the Rodri injury just as one thing, so he's a phenomenal footballer, never in doubt. My honest opinion, and I know it's a weird thing because we'll come on to some of the refereeing decisions and how it panned out for Arsenal. My honest appraisal of Man City is I think they came out to deliberately push and antagonise and really get under the skin of Arsenal.
Yeah,
they're not the first team to try and do that to Arsenal, right? And a lot of people do it to teams that enjoy having possession and a lot of passing. You're usually seeing lower down the league teams do it. But in my opinion, Rodri went down like a sack of potatoes from Havertz within seconds of that opening whistle. And he wasn't injured. Let's not even pretend he was close to being injured. He thought he had an opportunity to get a red card or a yellow card against Havertz within seconds. And in my opinion, when he got injured against Partey, yes, it's unfortunate he got injured, obviously, and for the individual, it's very damaging. I genuinely think he was looking for a penalty and got it a bit wrong. I don't understand the run he made next to Partey. He kind of ran into him, and then unfortunately just jolted his leg and went down. And I think what happened is when he came off, it wasn't so much about their flowing football stopped. I genuinely think it wasn't in the game plan to be like, oh, how do we rough him up? But our main guy, who's a really good wind-up merchant, is gone off the pitch. Right, what we do? We'll send in Kyle Walker. He'll sort it out. Go on, captain. You can run quickly. You can run back. And for that Calafiori goal, it was superb. The moaning from the Man City players, delicious. And it's because when you look at a still of it, Kyle Walker was back in position, absolutely fine.
There was,
I just think it was beautiful. The Calafiori finish, no one saw it coming. Keeper's beaten, a beautiful goal, beautiful man. What a full kind of big game debut for him. But you then look at the Gabriel goal. There was the chance we just missed where Gabriel got ahead of Doku. All the Man City players, hands up, that was a foul. They're doing all blocking. The goal then happens in an identikit way with Kyle Walker doing his cheeky Ben White, touch him on the belly and then get left as a kind of like a granddad. And every single Man City player was round the ref, complaining in their ear. And it's what they did for the entirety of that first half. Yeah. So for all Arsenal's great creative play and bouncing back from what could have been, you say, a horrific, 3 or 4-0 loss, Man City almost got into their own heads about how angry they needed to be. And he just set it up beautifully. What a game when you've got that level of drama. But the narrative of that first half was, this is a spicy one, good for the neutral. Yeah. Everything's great. We love seeing these games. And then suddenly it all changes and it's dark arts. It's negative play, very different. And I found it fascinating.
Yeah, I think the narrative post-match has been really interesting. But I think, look, we do have to look at that moment from the ref with Kyle Walker, because I think if that happens to Arsenal, I'm a little bit pissed off. I am a little bit pissed off that he's called our player over and not really giving him the time to get back into position. I am a little bit annoyed about that. But I would also say there's a lot of time between that, Martinelli standing Kyle Walker up, beating him and getting the ball across. Like, Kyle Walker does recover. He does try to jockey Martinelli out of play. Martinelli beats him, gets the ball across. So I think as much as Kyle Walker was like, I wasn't in position, but you did recover. There was still time for you to fix that.
The thing people forget from that, the way the free kick happened, whenever you get a goal, you forget what the initial foul was. And it was a really typical of that first half Man City challenge. They knew they needed to have a substitution for Rodri, and they deliberately just side down Partey. And I don't know, to coin a bad phrase, maybe chat shit, get banged. I think like they deliberately should have been caught up by that free kick. It was the nature of the free kick they gave away. And the fact the referee had to give them a talking to was purely because they'd shithoused enough that it needed talking to with both captains. Crazy, right? Like, I don't know.
I think there were a few, because there was also the Haaland challenge on Saliba when he completely cleaned him out, nowhere near the ball. Like, Adam, I think obviously now we're coming in from an Arsenal point of view. In the second half, Arsenal definitely did their fair bit of shithousery and definitely did their fair bit of dark arts. But I think Charles does have a point with the fact that Man City were definitely there to get under our skin, and how Haaland wasn't booked in that 90 minutes kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, certainly for that incident that you mentioned with Saliba, I felt that was definitely something you would definitely see given as a yellow card in League One level standards of football. So, I regularly see it with Sam Vokes with Wickham getting it every time for the most ridiculous things. And he's not nowhere near as harsh as what Haaland did in that very incident. But yeah, it was fascinating from the kind of neutral point of view, how much, you know, Man City decided that they needed to deploy these kind of tactics. So really, as you guys have mentioned, rattle kind of the Arsenal team, because yeah, we've probably not seen too much of that side necessarily from a Man City perspective, because they haven't had to. No. And I think they genuinely saw this as like, this is a huge threat, especially I think with the midweek game against Inter, where they were played really closely by the Inter side, you know, and I think that probably frustration boiled over into this game, where they knew they had to get a result regardless of the outcome. They had to get a result. So yeah, interesting dynamics that they decided to deploy. And you know, as Charles has alluded to, it didn't really work out in the favor of Rodri. So then their kind of game A goes out of the window, and they're having to think on their feet as to what else they can do. So yeah, it was bizarre that we've kind of see these tactics in these games, but it actually made it for a really interesting viewing.
It was so fascinating,
so intense.
It was like, it felt like a proper rivalries are back, and nobody on that pitch liked each other, and it was all building up to this absolute classic. And then the moment. Now, I have to just start with Leandro Trossard. You are a fucking idiot, right? You are just kicking that ball away. We've just, how many times do you have, like, it's been the narrative of the past 3 weeks has been kicking the ball away, Declan Rice being sent off. I think it is a completely brain dead moment from Trossard, right? Not standing up for him at all. But Michael Oliver blows his whistle within a second of Trossard kicking the ball and has the red card out within 1.5 seconds. Like, he cannot wait to give that red card. Now, with the Doku one earlier in the game, now people have pointed out, and I don't know how much I agree with this, that Doku is charitably kicking it back to the Arsenal players so they can take the free kick, right? I think he's kind of kicking it in the rough direction, but it's still kicking the ball away. It's delaying play. Michael Oliver takes a second, he thinks, and he goes, no, that's not a yellow card. He's passed it that way, not wasting time, foul, right? Yeah. With Trossard, it is bang, bang, gone instantly, right? Like, no thought behind it whatsoever. And it's also at the very second that you should be blowing for halftime. So I think at that moment, he had a chance to go, you know what, the game's getting a bit heated. Halftime, everybody off, into the changing rooms, and then we can just out for the second half, right? I think it's bad refereeing from him, right? I think he had a terrible game on the whole. I feel like if he's the best the Premier League have got, we really are fucking screwed. So I feel like he was terrible all over for Man City with that decision, with the Walker decision, for countless others across the game. But my question is, and this is generally not just with Arsenal, is does the punishment fit the crime? I'm not sure that Trossard missing a game and a half is fair for kicking the ball away. And I wouldn't even say this. I would say this if this was a player who wasn't for Arsenal. I just don't think, when you've got Lisandro Martinez flying in with his studs up and violent conduct from what I've seen this season kind of widely being ignored, why are they focusing on this? Like, Adam, why do you think it just seems like such a disproportionate amount of effort on what is a relatively small issue that nobody was complaining about?
I think he got it wrong. I think in the moment he got caught up with all the different kind of emotions. Maybe people were shouting at him, expecting him to do something. But yeah, I think the kind of punishment was incorrect. But I would argue that potentially his challenge on Bernardo probably was a yellow card. So regardless of that incident, I think maybe he gave the wrong thing. What would have been nice, actually, at the end of this game was for referees to explain why they gave things. It would have been great.
Well, we got two explanations. We got two. We got one from the ref saying it was for kicking the ball away, and one from PGMOL saying it was for the foul. So we got a bonus explanation.
But I think this could be something that they look into, because it needs to come from the actual person's mouth as opposed to PGMLO kind of giving their explanation. It needs to come from the referee. That, you know, sometimes I'm happy for them to kind of acknowledge that they may have got it wrong in the moment. I think most fans they'd be annoyed, but I think it would be better for the game at large to kind of acknowledge it and kind of go, right, cool, move on kind of thing. I appreciate it's not going to be as straightforward as we move on, but at least there's that human element, which I feel is missing at the moment. Whereas at the moment, there's loads of conspiracy theories about Michael Oliver and his involvement with the club.
But this is a concerted effort across games from PGMOL. This is a thing that they are choosing to focus on and choosing to punish really heavily. Incidentally, only against Arsenal, but they are choosing to punish really heavily for, like, Charles, why do you think they're focusing on this? I feel like this is a Howard Webb directive, right?
So the level of detail to reffing is really disproportionate. So if you look at, let's ignore the fact that it could have been a yellow for a barge, right? Because it could have been. But we've already said by the same context, Haaland on Saliba, not a yellow. And in fact, we saw later in the game, Haaland on Gabriel, not a yellow, with the VAR called a reckless barge, but they weren't allowed to intervene because it wasn't a red. So you either go nothing or red. There's no yellow, right? And that sums it up for me. VAR can only get involved in certain decisions. There's no context of where the ball is on the pitch, being able to have a word in the referee's ear and just say those human things, the things that we see on TV. Had Man City wanted to take a quick free kick there, realistically, what would they have done? Trossard was the only man ahead of the 10 players behind him. There was no world in which that was on the counter-attack, or Man City looked really lively in those dying seconds of the first half. And if it's about protecting the amount of time in a half, Michael Oliver gave away 17 minutes of extra time in that game of football. That is wildly different to the directive that came in this season, which was to be different from last season. And you probably won't see that amount of extra time in many games this Premier League season. Rodri wasn't injured for that long. He was probably more injured for going down against Havertz with his face than he was for having an ACL, but that's by the by. An injury is an injury. But the context in which cards are given doesn't befit the actual what we see on a screen. And a VAR should be able to say, just to let you know, Michael, actually, we'll just add some time on if we need to. They weren't really doing anything in the counter. If I said, I don't know if you've looked at the stats or not looked at the stats, but how many fouls do you think happened in the entire game? I don't know if you know or don't know, but if you had to guess, how many fouls do you reckon happened over the 107 minutes?
I feel like he was giving everything, like north of 20 maybe.
Yeah. And Adam, for you?
I would say roughly 40.
Yeah. So there were 17 fouls, and that resulted in 9 yellow cards. So Arsenal received 6 yellow cards for 10 fouls in the entire game. That's weird. Like, that's weird in terms of where's the warning? Where's the world in which you say, hey, cut that out? 10 fouls from Arsenal in that entire game. But the narrative and the dialogue from the Man City players is the dark arts were there. We just came out to foul. We didn't come to play football, etc. 10 fouls is tiny, but to get 6 yellows, where's the leniency to it just seems weird to me. So I think refs could do with having VAR in their ear a bit more often. And I think that would allow VAR to be a bit more open and say, do you know what? I don't just need to come in for the black and white decisions of I'm going to ruin the game or not. I can be an actual value add. And I think that's where PGMOL are missing a trick. And again, if I had to talk about another sport, rugby does it very well. You allow the game to continue and the referee will get alerted in their ear to say, hey, do you know what? I've actually seen something that we do deem to be a bit incorrect. When the ball's next out, we're going to talk you through it. You can see it on a screen and everyone goes, oh yeah, do you know what? He has punched him and no one saw it kind of style. That's what VAR should be adding value to. It shouldn't be, oh, I'm sorry, we can't tell you the context of why Trossard's sent off. Well done, Michael. You made a decision in 1.5 seconds.
Yeah, good process. Yeah, no, I feel, and the thing is, it was such a game-defining moment, right? Because then we've just talked about how fantastic the first half was. This is the flagship game in the Premier League season. The whole world is watching. And then the second half, if you watched 5 minutes, you've watched that entire half because the same thing happened over and over and over again for 45 minutes, right? It was completely ruined. I think I had numerous messages of people like my family members who support Liverpool, lots of friends being like, it is disgusting how Arsenal chose to play that second half, just defending the entire time, no attempt to play football. For the Liverpool fan who did message me, when you got a man sent off and tried to continue playing football, you lost 5-0. We didn't want to lose 5-0. We wanted to keep the win. But I think, look, before we get onto like the goal and the moment, I'm so proud of this Arsenal team. Every game I come out and I'm like, I'm so proud. We went away to Spurs and won. We had a difficult game away to Atalanta and got the draw. We've travelled back with a day's less rest without our captain. We've taken Saka off. We're down to 10 men. Calafiori, Martinelli, and Timber have all gone off with injuries. And we've still not conceded a goal for like 57 minutes until the last 5 seconds, right? I think it has to be said, the structure and the discipline that team showed, how Arteta got that message across so quickly in 15 minutes is just fascinating to me. That the team instantly knew exactly what to do. Like,
it was described to me as it looked like a training exercise, right? But PGMOL have turned up. Like it's like absolute hell, right? You're like, right, lads, we're just going to play in small triangles near the cones. Oh, by the way, there's a ref. Good luck.
It was horrendous watching. I hated every second of it. I was pacing up and down my living room. My girlfriend was telling me to sit down and relax. It wasn't working. It was a horrible 45 minutes. But eventually, Manchester City do get the breakthrough. And Adam, it was really quick thinking from Jack Grealish. Obviously, the one moment they kind of caught us out of shape. I feel like Man City, you kind of alluded to it, they looked like they were out of ideas. There was zero creativity. Ruben Diaz was the only man on the ball. There is a sign of concern there for Man City, apart from the fact they got out of jail at the end. There is a bit of concern there for their lack of creativity, right?
There is. You need sometimes in those moments spontaneity, like someone just to take a shot, for example, or just to do something extraordinary, something that catches your opponents off guard. And so I think Jack Grealish did capture it at that very moment, because you're expecting maybe a longer delay for someone to actually whip the ball in. I think full of credit as well. We haven't mentioned it at this stage, but Raya being able to absorb a lot of those kind of balls into the boxes, taking a lot of that pressure off the defense and the people in front of him. I felt, though, one thing I will call out about Arteta, I felt like maybe he should have taken off Partey like 15 minutes prior to this stage. Bearing in mind he had already got a yellow card in the first half. I was expecting him to come off in the second half. We kind of alluded it prior to the Trossard sending off, and we thought, right, I think he's going to put a Jorginho or someone else in his place to ensure that he doesn't accumulate another situation where he might get sent off. So credit to Partey, but I think that maybe was the element of he can't expand his natural game in terms of his input. And he, all of the circumstances were, he was having to chase people back. You know, he didn't have to do much running in that respect.
He kind of suited him a bit more.
Really.
That's like
it suited him better. Yeah, exactly. I was expecting.
He wasn't getting caught out of position. So
I just felt like maybe he could have made that call a little bit earlier to inject a bit more kind of energy in the park. But look, other than that, that's me nitpicking, I think, really at Arteta in terms of the game plan, because I think Jose Mourinho would have been really happy with that performance in the second half. He'd have been delighted apart from that goal. That's the only element that you'd have been pissed off with.
The way we should like flip this up, so it's all about, you know, Arsenal negative, Arsenal defense and whatever. There's been a lot of waffle from Man City since. Like a lot of their players have come out to the press, suddenly they all have a voice. The only people you'll not hear from at that club is the owners, because, you know, they're all on their way to jail or whatever.
They've got their own agendas right now.
Yeah,
they're busy.
But essentially, all that waffle is essentially the best team in the world who score for fun, who have the best striker the Premier League's ever seen, who was irrelevant for a whole half of football. They couldn't beat a 10-man Arsenal team at home. They ran out of ideas, and that's all on Pep. Like if people weren't excited to see that, how that game concluded. I mean, obviously the goal at the end, brilliant, great drama. And, you know, I suppose Man City maybe did deserve a goal, I suppose, for the amount of shots they had. But it wasn't Arteta being negative. It was Pep just didn't have any answers. And he doesn't really have, for this huge squad he's got. I mean, Haaland was ridiculously inefficient. Like, you might as well have just put Jack Grealish on up front on his own, doing whatever. And we drew back to that first goal, was all created by Pep going out of character and pulling midfielders wide. That's exactly how they scored their second goal. And I have no idea why he didn't do it half an hour earlier. Quite clearly, Arsenal weren't going to come out and be on the counter. We've taken off Saka. Havertz is not going to outrun a bunch of Man City defenders. He's just not a pace merchant, and that's fine. But when Grealish came on, it really changed up how wide he could pull a defender out. And apologies, I forget who came on the other side, but they did exactly the same. You had two wingers kind of pulling out of position there. And I just think if Pep really wanted that more, he should have tried a bit harder. And in the end, they got pretty lucky. If Kivior doesn't get in the way of that ball, David Raya catches it and falls down, and it's 2-1 Arsenal. And that's not to say I feel hard done by, but I don't know how much Man City earned getting a point, which they celebrated a bit too hard at home.
Well, I think, this is the fascinating thing as well, because I think if you flip the narrative, and the last thing on this game, so I'm just looking at how long we've done on this, but if you flip the narrative, if this is an Arsenal home game, City are down to 10 men, they've got no Rodri, they've got no Haaland, they lose another 3 players through injury, Arsenal struggle and Arsenal are 2-1 down, they struggle and battle and finally get a draw in the last second. Arsenal are absolutely battered for being crap and not taking advantage of Man City being down to 10 men, right? I'm not sure why the narrative is reversed because Arsenal are away. I feel like a lot of the narrative has been lost in all of the noise after this. But my overarching feeling is just super proud of the result of the performance and how we are definitely in their heads. Like, they are so concerned about us. They never used to think about us. They used to just half think and they beat us, and now they're scared.
One thing that was fascinating was seeing like Guardiola really hit a chair for that first goal.
Yes,
that was a sturdy chair.
Do you remember the good old days where if you kicked a water bottle, you got sent off at Old Trafford? I remember Wenger having that, or Mourinho having it. You know, I'm surprised, but it shows how they're rattled. And you know, look, I think the 115 charges are going to come against this club. I think they're all feeling the heat of it, and I can only wish a speedy recovery to Rodri before, you know, the next time he plays will be against like Stockport or someone like that when they're relegated and playing league football again. So yeah, we've definitely got under their skin, and I love it.
We will see. It was absolute scenes at the end. I really enjoyed Haaland mouthing off and then shitting himself when Gabriel Jesus came up to him. I really enjoyed Miles Lewis-Skelly as well. A little 17-year-old just walking straight up to Haaland and being like, come on then, let's have it. Getting booked before he made his full debut is a really impressive achievement, I'll be honest. Incredible. Apparently, he got booked for telling Raya to go down. I wasn't sure that was a bookable offence, but apparently that's the reason why he was booked. But absolutely incredible. Just what a Sunday afternoon. A super Sunday for everyone involved. But guys, we're going to leave that game there. We're actually going to leave it there. I think that's all of it now. We've done enough.
Yep.
Adam, I'm going to give you a chance to speak now, and let's go to our next game. We're going to talk about West Ham 0, Chelsea 3. Lopetegui's in trouble, eh?
Just a bit of trouble, isn't he? I think what was really resonating with the West Ham fan base was that, they don't have the same bite as they've normally applied in these games. But I think they were also lost with Lopetegui's tactics, the changing of substitutions, for example. They just looked so off the boil. They let Chelsea have free reign of the pitch at times. It was embarrassing. You know, it made Chelsea look like world beaters in that respect. You know, Nicholas Jackson with 2 of the goals, you know, and Cole Palmer, I mean, he could have had a field day in the end, but I think it was just far too easy. And I think what I put in my notes was next 5 games really could define West Ham's kind of, not necessarily the season, but where they could be playing for in that respect. Because at this moment in time, I think it's 2 home games that they've got to face in those 5 fixtures that I mentioned. When I looked at the fixtures earlier, it didn't look kind of really kind on them. So, for example, away to Liverpool, away to Brentford, then they've got possibly, you could maybe say, a must-win game at home to Ipswich before they take on Spurs away. And then they're at home to Man United. So I don't think necessarily they're straightforward fixtures when you look at the way West Ham are playing right now. Maybe in previous years, you would have said Spurs is definitely one of those games that they get up for, especially Man United potentially. But I think this could be an interesting period for Lopetegui. I just genuinely didn't feel that there was much love in that stadium for him or the players. You know, I don't feel like they had an idea. And that is worrying, given that this was the change of philosophy. This was the change that they wanted to implement. They wanted to get away from Moyes. They didn't really necessarily buy into his strategy in terms of transfer targets, which is why they changed their approach in that respect. And yeah, I think there's some worrying signs for West Ham there, Rory.
Well, is this part of the issue? Because I think the issue is that they're going through quite a drastic change in philosophy, right? From Moyes to like what Lopetegui tries to achieve. These players have been playing for Moyes for a very long time. Like a lot of these players, maybe they just need to adapt a little bit into this new system. It doesn't excuse the absolute lack of effort and defending that they did in this game. But I feel like there's maybe a part of that transition that is kind of causing a few issues. Like, Charles, do you think... it makes me think of Bournemouth with Iraola. They got a really slow start last season. I remember when Arsenal played them away and they were absolutely atrocious. And then by the end of the season, Iraola's up for manager of the season, right? Like, do West Ham just need to be a little bit more patient, or do you think Lopetegui is? Because I always feel like he's been a bit of like the Emperor's new clothes. I'm not quite convinced of him anyway.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I don't think he's a good enough manager. If you want to go places, I think he's a good enough manager if you want to avoid relegation. And I'm not saying that's where West Ham end. I'm actually going to be quite nice to West Ham. If you look at their fixtures, they've taken 0 from 3 at home, but their 3 home games have been against City, Villa, and Chelsea. And as far as these things go, that's not the greatest fixtures. But it is worrying times for them because they have enough personnel in terms of transfers in where they should all be better than the sum of their parts. And for some reason, it's not clicked. I don't like Lopetegui's style. I don't think he was the right manager to hire. But I wonder, are we seeing now a league table that's a bit more competitive? There was a real feel last season that with certain teams maybe not turning up and 3 teams that were like relegated really early on, everyone knew who was going down. It felt like you could get away with not being that good and get up the league table. And I just think this year, it seems to be a bit more competitive 5 games in, where the likes of maybe Newcastle, Spurs, Brighton look like, and Chelsea and United look like they can maybe accumulate more points than they did last season. So someone has to lose out in that world. And right now it looks like West Ham, I guess.
Well, there are still 6 teams that are winless in the league. So they're 5 games in. Leicester, Palace, Ipswich, Southampton, Everton, of course, and Wolves still are without a win. Now, this could be an all-timer relegation battle, or it could be what you're saying, that it is just, is the gap getting wider? Is it?
I've been getting this all wrong. I've got a series on my TikTok, which is Unbeatable FC, to see who is the last team in the league to lose a game. Can anyone go unbeaten and do the Invincibles? And if not, who is last and what week do they lose? I should have gone the other way around. I said, which teams aren't going to win a game? Way longer list, right? Way longer.
You got a lot more to choose from. You got a lot more to choose from.
Aspirational as well, you know? You almost pray for the 3 points.
But, Adam, this was a concerning performance for West Ham. If we talk about Chelsea, I think we need to give Maresca a few flowers, 1 or 2 flowers, because he is... I think Chelsea are still going to be hot, cold. You're never going to know what they're going to do from one week to the next. But amongst the chaos, it does feel like he's getting a little bit of a tune out of the players. The players are buying into his system. Even sticking with like Nicholas Jackson, everything around him has been chaotic, but he's always been the striker, right? It's always been him. We're going to give you the time. We're going to give you the starting spot. You are our number 9. Do you feel like Maresca is slowly figuring out this squad? There's rumours he's bringing back Chilwell. He's happy to bring him back. So there's flexibility between the bomb squad and not the bomb squad, right? Do you feel like he's kind of handling this situation well?
I think we always alluded to the fact that he's going to try and bring a core of players to be his match squad, and that'll be where his concentration of efforts will be. I feel like they've had so much transition that this could be the period where they actually stabilize a little bit more now. They certainly seems a lot more fluid, maybe stable at the back as well, with Tosin and Colwell at the back. I felt they were quite solid. And Cucurella, as much as people hate him, I think he gives that natural width on that side sometimes as well. So it did feel like maybe they are getting to a point where there's a bit more solid foundation. People know their roles a bit more. But yeah, I think in terms of Nicholas Jackson, it's an odd one, isn't it? Because he sits somewhere in between. I feel like he's not maybe good enough for a top 6 club in my eyes, but I think he's certainly a player that could develop into a really good prospect. And you're right in terms of highlighting that facts of he's harshly judged in terms of his contributions, because actually when you look at his outputs for last season, scored a lot of goals. If you take
Yeah.
away Cole Palmer's goals, then he's the next big contribution for Chelsea. So I do feel like he's harshly criticised, but at the same time, it's just simple things that he seems to just need to maybe progress in terms of his game, his understanding. For example, there's that game against Man City where he can see Akanji right next to him, but he still strays into an offside position. That's the kind of bits that he just needs someone to sit down and work with him a little bit more closely. And you could be seeing then potentially a really outstanding player. But potentially with all the noise that's happening at Chelsea, he's maybe been lost in that kind of development piece. And I suspect with Maresca, he's identified that and they're gradually going to build on that. And you can see that by the kind of progress that they've done so far, Chelsea. But like you say, sometimes they're really good, or as Gattuso would say, sometimes really shit. So there's no in between really with them. So yeah, let's see what happens next weekend. But Chelsea do seem to be getting a bit more momentum, that's for sure.
And Charles, before we move on from this game, I just want to say Jadon Sancho looking quite happy at life in London. Another assist for him. Obviously, early days, Man United fans must be fuming, but it does look like he's kind of enjoying himself down there, right?
Oh, 100%. He's got a spring in his step. I think, he's a London boy originally. Yeah, Man United fans rightly should be annoyed because it shows a huge difference maybe between Maresca and Ten Hag. Maresca's done a great job, I think, of being a bit of a bastard to some of his players without everyone else going with it. Ten Hag seems to have just been harsh to everybody. Big things for Jadon Sancho, and I hope he comes good. I hope he doesn't come good at Chelsea or Man United. I hope he goes back on loan. I'd have him at the Arsenal. I'd have him at a lot of other clubs and see him do well. But I think with this Chelsea side, they are going to get a lot of goals this season. If you just look at them on paper, they have so much depth of players that are capable, and they will win and lose. They will win and lose all the time. But when they do win, I think they'll win quite handsomely. I genuinely sit in a very small minority of people who thinks Cole Palmer isn't as good as his stats show. And I think as soon as Chelsea have more players who perform, I actually think you'll see less from Cole Palmer purely because he will not be doing it all on his own. You have to pass when you're in a big team. There is a world in which Bukayo Saka could have become that at Arsenal, and then you actually built enough other positions that even though he's got phenomenal stats, they're not ridiculous like Cole Palmer's are. But yeah, Jadon Sancho, what a player. I hope he gets back in the England setup. And I say that not even as an England fan. I think he's good for the game. I like the fact he's had the continental time, and a bit like Noni Madueke, it's nice to see another talent who can hopefully emerge and not get ruined by a club, which Sancho was happening for Sancho at United.
No, I think it was the perfect. I was dubious about the move at the time. I thought, does he need more chaos? But so far, so good. So hopefully it continues for Jadon. He is a pleasure to watch. It helps that there's someone willing to run so he can do his 1-2s, right? That's what he thrives on. And no one at United was willing to do that for him. But next, let's go to one of the Midlands derbies. I don't know which one. There's so many around there, but it's one of the Midlands derbies. Villa 3. Wolves 1. A fantastic week for Villa as they go into Switzerland and absolutely batter young boys. I was going to make it doesn't matter. They batter young boys, and then Wolves. There was a joke somewhere, but Wolves take the lead through a fantastic Cunha goal. Adam, a really exciting game. Morgan Rogers once again very exciting in this game. Yes,
certainly. But that kind of Wolves' approach to this match really made it feel like it was going to go their way. Aston Villa didn't have it their own way. I think Unai Emery described it as one of the worst halves of football that he's had since joining the club. Better
language than that.
He obviously wasn't impressed by the approach of the Villa side in that first half. And it was strange because even Wolves fans have kind of alluded to the fact that they don't know what happened at half time because it was a completely different side. There was arguments amongst the players. For example, Cunha was getting frustrated with his teammates. And then you had the various kind of incidents with injuries to various different players. Substitutions that did come on didn't have the same tenacity and intensity as the first 11, for example. And that played into the hands of Aston Villa, who just kind of picked them apart, And although 3-1 kind of slightly flattered, I suppose, because it was 2 late goals. It does kind of highlight maybe there's a bit of concern about Wolves backing kind of Charles's prediction on the previous episode for them to go down. But I think there's this overriding kind of feeling with you can get rid of Gary O'Neill, but who are you going to replace him? Because no one's going to be potentially as cheap and being able to work with this budget and maybe this team and perform miracles. I think that there's got to be a level of expectation. I think what hasn't helped is behind the scenes, the stuff with Wolves upping the price of like tickets, for example, and kits hasn't gone down well with the fan base. So there's a bit of like clouds around kind of Wolves at the moment where they're not happy off the pitch, but they're also not happy on the pitch. So it's a really kind of questioning time. And I think everyone kind of look at this Wolves side and feel like they will get a result, they will pull and they will persevere. But how many times do you kind of say, their luck will turn? You've got to kind of grind out results now. And it comes to a point where maybe Gary O'Neill is lacking ideas. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Rory.
Yeah, well, I think off the top of my head, the matches they've had have been very tough. So I think they have had a very hard start to the season in terms of their fixtures. So they had Arsenal away, Chelsea at home. Then they've had, Forest away, they should probably get a result. But then Newcastle at home, Villa away. Like, they've had some very hard fixtures to start the season. They've now got Liverpool at home next. But then after that, Brentford away, City at home. Like, they've still got some tough games coming up. It doesn't really get easy until maybe Palace at home on November the 2nd. Then they've got Southampton at home, Fulham away. Maybe it gets a little bit easier. So I would caveat that with they've had some very tough fixtures to start this season. But Charles, it feels, especially like with a player like Mosquera going off injured in this game as well, looked like a serious injury. Just nothing's really falling from at the moment, and Gary O'Neill isn't really changing enough to kind of make them harder to beat, at least, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, their big issues, they haven't kept a clean sheet this season, and they don't look like they're going to do it anytime soon. They shouldn't have got rid of Max Kilman. He was too important to the club for the money they got back. And I don't really know where Gary O'Neill goes, because there aren't players within his squad that are being underused at the moment that he can bring on, and it all turns it around. And seemingly, if you're about to get relegated, you don't go out big in January and spend a load of money, right? Or at least that's not been the trend in recent years. You shore it up and prepare for Championship football. And I really feel Wolves are going to go down. The only thing that maybe keeps them up is that Everton are rubbish, but we're going to come on to them later about maybe getting a bit of money and changing their fortune. But I think, Max Kilman, they've just not replaced him essentially. And you get certain clubs where one particular defender embodies what their entire defence is about. So I think maybe Ben Dunk in the past has done that at Brighton.
We're talking about Everton again, aren't we?
Well, yeah, you do get into a world, right, where you get rid of the wrong defender and suddenly it's just embarrassing. So I think, unless you can shore up that defence and find some way to either maybe bring a player out of the attack and go back, and they're always scoring goals, but they ship twice as many. So maybe don't try and score as many. Maybe just shore it up a little bit. But who knows? Yeah,
a very, very disappointing start for Wolves, but Villa absolutely flying, looking like a top team with that midweek game, such a great performance in Switzerland, and then just straight off the back of that win in a derby. Absolutely fantastic for them. Let's move on to the next game. And we're going to kind of bring a bit of our Italian expertise in here, Adam. Let's do it. Leicester won, Everton won. Vardy scored again. Of course he did. But what we're actually going to talk about is the fact that Everton have new owners. They are up and running. They've been saved. It's the Friedkins who are in charge of Roma. What do we know about them, Adam?
They have a lot of optimism about the way that things should be done. They'll plow out a lot of money, but they'll expect quick returns on that. They'll want results. And I think this is where we spoke offline. We genuinely don't know how they're going to approach this Everton project. I don't know what the kind of thought is here in terms of long-term strategy, where they can see they can take Everton going forward. I appreciate there is probably a commercial side to the aspect. That's why they've gone about it, because when I was speaking, lucky enough to go on the Unholy Trinity podcast with Mike at the time, who's been a guest on our podcast, he talks about, how that new stadium is going to be used 365 days a year. There's going to be events all the time happening at that ground. So certainly from a commercial point of view, that's a revenue generator, and that's something that is going to be a bigger benefit than they've got currently with Roma, for example. But the aspect of what they expect on the pitch is going to be an interesting one, because as shown with Roma, they have a short temperament. They will expect results to happen if they invest in terms of the squad. So you can only see like Daniele De Rossi, who's been sacked within a couple of games, and that's transpired. It seems like they had a lot of arguments building up to the event itself. So, you know, they'll want events to happen on the pitch as well as off the pitch. I feel that's where the energy is going to be, is how can we maintain the Premiership status but push them on as a club. But you've got a hell of a task when you look at the squad that they've got. There's a lot of deadwood. So it's going to require not just one window. There's going to be a number of windows. And then there's probably going to be a question mark over Sean Dyche and whether they believe in his kind of philosophies. I think they've pretty much changed managers consistently at Roma. So this is going to be interesting to see how they approach it. But yeah, I suppose the one kind of fruit to this is at least the Everton fan base are going to get owners that will invest willingly into the club. That's the positive out of all of this. And they know how to run a football club. Yeah. They are looking at that kind of structure with Rome right now, where they're trying to run it sustainably. So I appreciate that's probably with a caveat as well at times. However, that's a positive in the right direction as well, Rory.
I think you're absolutely right. They will bring stability to the board, right? Stability on the pitch and in the dugout we'll talk about, but I think like they'll bring stability to the board. They will invest. They are interested in improving the clubs they own, whereas like 777, we're not sure if they're actually interested in improving the clubs they own, right? Whereas we know that the Friedkins do want to achieve things, right? They talk a very good game. They talk a really good game. I'm not sure how much they deliver on that game, but they like to express the fact that they really, really want to be like big players in football. They want Roma to be back at the top of the tree in Italy. They're fighting this constant battle with the stadium, and that's Italian bureaucracy. But they love announcing it every season, the plans they have for this new stadium, right? And I feel like, well, at least they've got the new stadium at Everton already, right? They don't need to worry about it. But I think what concerns me is their lack of foresight, because as you said, they've sacked De Rossi this week. 4 games into the Serie A season. A couple of months ago, they offered him a 3-year contract because they had such a great end to the season and that he was the future for the club, right? So I feel like it shows a lack of forward planning for them. But then they did forward plan because they had Juric attending the games that Roma were going to be playing for when he took over. So there kind of was planning there, but then they did it behind De Rossi's back, and you kind of, there's a lot of noise around Roma all the time. And part of that is it being AS Roma and it being a chaotic city, it being a chaotic club. But Everton is a pretty chaotic club, and Liverpool is a pretty loud city for football, right? So I feel like there could be a lot of noise around it. But I think in the boardroom, there will at least be a bit of certainty about who is, like what the idea is, what their end goal is, how they get there. I'm not sure how they'll do it. But for Everton, I think overall it's good news. And if not 777, then it's probably even better news. So I think it'll be interesting. I did see a great thing on Twitter. An Everton fan posited the question, what if Everton and Roma both qualify for Europe? And the first reply was, I wouldn't worry about that, Lal. And I was
I would say, what a sad time for Neil Mopai to have left the club. What a shame.
What a shame.
Should have hung on for the payout.
Oh, well, I'm sure we'll be fine with it. But yeah, good news for Everton there overall. I think elsewhere in the league this weekend, Fulham 3, Newcastle 1. Emile Smith-Rowe flying with another goal. And Reece Nelson getting his first goal for the club and an Iwobi assist. Hale End FC absolutely flying in the Premier League this season. But Adam, I want to get your thoughts on Smith-Rowe as a signing for Fulham. He's having an incredible start to his career there, right?
Yeah. I mean, you've got a great manager in Marco Silva that will embed that kind of trust and confidence into you. But I think Emile Smith-Rowe needed a run of games. He wasn't going to get it at Arsenal quite clearly. It was going to be on a rotational basis at best. But I think that kind of gives him the opportunity now to forge a career, potentially move him or get an opportunity in another top 4 side. It could be back at Arsenal. You never know if the circumstances work out for himself. But certainly this is great for him because that gives him the belief going forward. I think the run of goals, the assist that he's doing right now, you can see that's having effects on the others as well around him. I've been excited about this Fulham side because I felt like this signing alongside the others were the catalyst. I think they maybe just need to shore up at the back and maybe have a more prominent forward. But look, they're delivering right now and they're really, really pressing on. But yeah, fantastic form from Emil Smith-Rowe, and that's why I've got him in my fantasy football team. So I'm really happy with that.
I already have too many Fulham players. I need to sell one. Charles, I'm going to go to you for the fun one. Brighton 2, Forest 2. 2 managers sent off. Absolute scenes. Everyone thought all the antagonism was at the Etihad, but it was all down in East Sussex.
100%. And I mentioned earlier that I had that Unbeaten FC series. I went into that Fulham-Newcastle game seeing Newcastle lose and thinking, brilliant, that's another team knocked out. 4 teams remained and they all played each other on that Sunday. So 2 of them in Brighton and Nottingham Forest have somehow gone 5 games without losing. Forest are great value, and I'm really lucky. A good friend of mine is a big old Forest fan living up in Nottingham at the moment, and every game is a knife edge for him. But I love it. It's high energy. I think Brighton have had a fantastic start to the season as well and should be commended. Their fixtures have been difficult and their results have been impressive. But I do wonder, there is a recent trend in the Premier League for the top managers almost sacrificing the draw. So getting 1 point used to be perfectly acceptable. But now you'd rather get 3 or 0 and have a chance of going for 3. And I just wonder if Brighton, let's be honest, Brighton will probably finish higher at the table. I wonder if they're going to struggle for not having converted some of these draws into wins. But for Forest, what a feeling. I mean, that is a roller coaster club in itself of, 20 transfers in and out every window. But it's clicking, so good for them. And it's great to see, actually. I think it's important that there are these kind of high scoring draws and a bit of drama. And Chris Wood getting another goal. A lot of people's fantasy football teams will be happy.
His record is incredible. Just keeps scoring, doesn't he? It's insane. Elsewhere, Southampton and Ipswich drew 1-1, a very late equaliser there. Southampton was so close, but Ipswich did rescue a point. And Palace drew 0-0 with Man United. Dean Henderson took it personally and made sure that Manchester United didn't score. Onana pulled off an incredible double save, and Eze missed a sitter. I think that was everything from this game. I kind of really lost interest. I was on a run of 0-0 games, and I was really losing my mind. But then Lecce Parma saved me. And guys, if you want to hear about that, check out our Serie A episode because it was a banger. But guys, we're going to take a very quick break, and when we come back, we're going to preview all of the weekend's action and maybe some energy drinks cup. We will see you on the other side.
The Carabao Cup is back, and Rory and Charles, I'm going to take you through the key fixtures that are going to take place. For you listeners and viewers, hopefully you're going to embrace these games tonight. If not, then you've also got Wednesday's games to look forward to. So we'll start off by talking about Chelsea. They are at home to Barrow, so that game takes place at 7:45. Alternatively, if you fancy taking on the team that Arsenal so almost got the 3 points against, Man City host Watford. Alternatively, we've got Walsall at home to Leicester City, and my beloved Wycombe Wanderers are at home to Aston Villa. That's going to be the prime game on Sky, so keep an eye out for that one. That certainly should be an interesting game. The one that hasn't potentially or will not be played is AFC Wimbledon. They were due to be at home against Newcastle United. However, the weather conditions in the UK, Rory, have been absolutely atrocious to the point that it's flooded the Plough Lane Stadium, and the actual pitch looks like a golf course right now. So
they were due to play Crew Alex at the weekend. Our game's been postponed. There's also a horrendous video of a Newcastle fan slagging out a fan-owned club. If you've not seen it, he comes across as the least in touch person going. It's incredible, honestly.
Definitely. But alternatively, if you want to hang out for Wednesday's games, we've got Arsenal at home to Bolton Wanderers. That's at 7:45. And at 8 p.m, we've got a bit of a Premier League all-star team, and that is Liverpool at home to West Ham. So that'll be a fascinating matchup. But we'll move into the Premier League games. And again, it's going to be a feisty affair. We'll start off with 12:30 p.m. on Saturday as Newcastle United host Man City. If you recall, Rory, this was a fascinating game.
Oil Classico?
It's the Oil Classico, as it is known to many a fan. Anyway, we'll move into the 3 p.m. fixtures, and we'll see Arsenal at home to Leicester City, Brentford at home to West Ham. That could be a juicy tie. Then we've got Chelsea at home to Brighton, the feeder club, so to speak, and Everton at home to Crystal Palace, and Nottingham Forest at home to Fulham. Before at 5:30, we see Wolverhampton Wanderers inevitably probably getting beaten by Liverpool. We'll move into Sunday's fixtures. At 2 p.m, we've got Ipswich Town at home to Aston Villa. And the big game that will take place, Super Sunday, as they call it, it is Man United at home to Tottenham Hotspur at 4:30. Before, on Monday, we are treated to the South Coast Derby, and that is Bournemouth at home to Southampton. You have to jazz it up in some way, right? That is at 8 p.m. And Rory and listeners and viewers, that is your fixtures for this weekend.
Beautiful. Well, I personally cannot wait for Bournemouth Southampton. I'll be honest, I'm really excited. But guys, thank you for joining us. Charles, I hope that was somewhere near the therapy that you needed. I don't know about you, but I've listened to every podcast going today and got myself all worked up. But we only did half an hour, so I think we did okay. But Charles, when our viewers and listeners want to find you, when can they find you online?
Find me at Chuck Davey on all socials. It'd be great if you could check out my YouTube videos and TikTok. Otherwise, I'll join you for the dialogue on X.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, listener. Adam, anything to say before I let them go home so they can go and listen to our Serie A episode right now?
There is that. Make sure you hit subscribe on our YouTube channel. We've been loving the recent additions to our channel, but the more the merrier, as we kind of allude to. We are humble with our goals, so we'd like to get to that 500 mark if we can. So that'd be appreciated. And likewise to Charles as well, because he's doing some good stuff there.
Exactly. And this drive of getting people to call me a knob seems to be picking up some traction. So if you want to call me a knob and subscribe, at least subscribe first. Be slightly polite. But guys, thank you for joining us. As always, do hit the like and subscribe button. You can find us on Twitter at Italian Anglo Pod. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Anglo-Italian Pod. If you're listening and on a podcast platform, give us a follow, give us a rating, and we will see you next time. See you later.
Cheers, guys.
Ciao, ciao.